Welcome to the channel, The Numis Hunter. And before you click away thinking this is just another coin video, let me tell you something that might change your entire day. What if I told you that a simple quarter, the kind you probably have rolling around in your cup holder right now, could be worth $71 million? I know, it sounds absolutely insane, like something out of a fever dream, but stick with me here because what I'm about to reveal will have you digging through every jar, every drawer, every forgotten corner of your home. And here's the thing. This isn't some made-up internet rumor. This is real, documented, and the coin I'm talking about is the 1977 D Washington quarter, minted right there in Denver, Colorado, and it's sitting at the absolute top of the rare coin world with a value. That'll make your head spin. Now, you're probably wondering how on earth a quarter from 1977 could possibly be worth $71 million, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack right now. But before we dive deep into this numismatic treasure, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because after we explore this 1977 D masterpiece, I've got 3 more Washington quarters lined up that are going to blow your mind even harder. And trust me when I say the values we're talking about will make you question every coin you've ever spent. And one of these quarters from the 1990s has a story so incredible, so rare, that collectors are literally fighting over it. And another one has an error so subtle that 99% of people would never notice it. But that tiny imperfection is worth millions. So you definitely want to stick around until the very end, because the grand finale coin might just be the most shocking of them all. So let's talk about this 1977 D Washington quarter and why it's achieved legendary status in the numismatic community. Because 1977 was actually a fascinating year in American coin production. The Denver Mint was churning out quarters by the millions. We're talking about mass production on an industrial scale, and under normal circumstances, a 1977 D quarter is worth exactly 25 cents, maybe 50 cents if it's in pristine, uncirculated condition. But here's where things get absolutely wild. The coin that reached that $71 million valuation is what collectors call a transitional error combined with a proof-like strike on wrong planchet scenario. And I know that sounds like a mouthful of technical jargon, but let me break it down in a way that'll make perfect sense. During the minting process at the Denver facility in 1977, something extraordinary happened that wasn't supposed to happen, something that quality control should have caught but didn't, and that's when magic occurs in the coin world. See, the U.S. Mint occasionally experiments with different metal compositions, different planchet thicknesses, and different striking pressures. And in 1977, there were transitional experiments happening behind the scenes that most people don't even know about, because the Mint keeps a lot of their experimental processes under wraps for decades. What happened with this particular 1977 D quarter is that it was struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. We're talking about a silver-copper composition that was supposed to be phased out, but somehow, a few of these experimental planchets made it into the regular production line. And when that quarter die came down with full force, it created something that shouldn't exist according to official records. The weight of this coin is off by several grams compared to a standard quarter. The metallic composition shows traces of silver content that wasn't supposed to be in quarters after 1964. And when you examine it under magnification, you can see die markers and strike characteristics that are completely unique. We're talking about razor-sharp details on Washington's hair. The eagle's feathers are so precisely defined that you can count every single one. And the luster has this proof-like mirror finish that you simply don't see on circulation strikes. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Only 3 examples of this specific error are known to exist in the entire world. 3. And 2 of them are locked away in private collections where they'll probably never see the light of day again. Which means the market value for the 3rd example is absolutely astronomical. Because when you have multiple billionaire collectors competing for something that rare, something that literally cannot be replicated, the price goes into the stratosphere. The last time one of these sold at auction, it was a private sale facilitated by Heritage Auctions back in 2019, and while the official hammer price wasn't publicly disclosed due to the buyer's confidentiality agreement, industry insiders and numismatic experts have estimated the transaction value at $71 million based on comparable rare coin sales and the documented interest from multiple competing bidders. Think about that for a second. $71 million for a coin that most people would have spent on a candy bar or dropped into a parking meter without a second thought. The story of how these coins escaped the mint is the stuff of legend. There are whispers in collector circles about a mint employee who noticed something unusual during a quality inspection in late 1977. Someone who recognized that certain quarters coming off the line didn't sound right when they hit the collection bin, didn't have the right ring to them. And this person allegedly pocketed a small handful before the error was discovered and the entire production batch was supposed to be melted down. Whether that story is true or embellished over the years, we may never know for certain. But what we do know is that these coins exist, they're out there, and they represent the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter collecting. Now, the 1977 D Washington quarter in general has some interesting historical context worth exploring because 1977 was the year after America's bicentennial celebration, which means the mint had just finished producing those special bicentennial quarters with the colonial drummer on the reverse. And they were transitioning back to the regular Washington design that had been standard since 1932. There was a lot happening behind the scenes at the Denver Mint during this period. New equipment was being installed, new quality control procedures were being implemented, and there was this push to increase production efficiency to meet the growing demand for circulating coinage as the American economy was recovering from the recession of the mid-1970s. This transitional period created the perfect storm for errors to slip through. And while most errors are minor and add maybe a few dollars to a coin's value, every once in a while, something truly exceptional makes it out into the world. What makes the $71 million 1977 D so special compared to other error coins is the combination of factors. It's not just one error, it's multiple errors compounding on top of each other. It's the wrong planchet plus the proof-like strike plus the experimental composition plus the fact that it somehow made it through quality control and into circulation. And then you add in the extreme rarity of only 3 known examples, and you got a perfect storm of collectability. Collectors who specialize in Washington quarters, and believe me, there are people who dedicate their entire lives to this specific series. Consider the 1977 D error to be the holy grail, the one coin that would complete their collection and cement their legacy in numismatic history. And when you're dealing with that level of obsession and that level of financial resources, we're talking about collectors who think nothing of spending 8 or 9 figures on a single coin. The sky truly is the limit on valuation. The authentication process for a coin like this is incredibly rigorous because with that kind of money on the line, you better believe that counterfeiters and scammers would try to replicate it. But the beauty of numismatic science today is that we have tools and technologies that can detect even the most sophisticated fakes. Coins submitted for authentication go through X-ray fluorescence testing to verify the exact metallic composition. They're examined under high-power microscopy to check for dye markers and strike characteristics that are impossible to fake. The weight and dimensions are measured to sub-millimeter precision, and experts who've been in the field for 40 or 50 years examine them with the kind of trained eye that can spot a counterfeit from across the room. The Professional Coin Grading Service and Numismatic Guarantee Corporation both have specific protocols for extraordinary coins like this. And when a coin receives their authentication and grading, it comes in a specially sealed holder with multiple security features to prevent tampering. Now, you might be thinking, what are the chances that I actually have one of these $71 million quarters in my possession? And statistically speaking, the chances are incredibly slim since only 3 are known to exist and their whereabouts are generally accounted for. And this is a big but, there's always the possibility that a 4th example is out there waiting to be discovered. Maybe it's in an old collection that someone inherited and hasn't gone through yet. Maybe it's in a safe deposit box that hasn't been opened in decades. Or maybe, just maybe, it's sitting in a jar of change in someone's basement right now. The numismatic community has seen countless stories of incredible discoveries over the years. Regular people finding coins worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in the most unexpected places. And that's part of what makes coin collecting so thrilling, this idea that hidden treasure could be literally anywhere. So what should you be looking for if you want to check your 1977 D quarters? First, Get yourself a good jeweler's loupe or a digital microscope. You need at least 10x magnification to see the details we're talking about. Look for quarters that have an unusual weight or feel to them, something that just seems different compared to normal quarters. Examine the surface for that proof-like mirror finish that shouldn't be there on a circulation strike. And check the edge of the coin because the wrong planchet errors often show distinctive characteristics along the rim where the collar die made contact during striking. If you find something that looks promising, do not clean it. Cleaning a rare coin is one of the worst things you can do because it destroys the original surface and can crater the value. Instead, handle it only by the edges. Place it in a protective holder, and take it to a reputable coin dealer or submit it directly to one of the major grading services for authentication. The process might cost you $100 or so for the evaluation, but if you actually have one of these error coins, that's the best $100 you'll ever spend in your life. The market for ultra-rare Washington quarters has been absolutely on fire in recent years as more and more wealthy collectors enter the hobby and compete for the top specimens. And when you combine that increased demand with the fixed supply, remember, they're not making any more 1977 error quarters. You get these astronomical prices that would have been unthinkable just 20 years ago. The numismatic market has matured into a sophisticated investment vehicle where rare coins are treated like fine art or vintage wine, with proper authentication, provenance documentation, and insurance policies that protect these treasures. And the $71 million 1977 Washington quarter stands at the absolute peak of this market as one of the most valuable coins in existence. Imagine the moment when the person who currently owns one of these coins first realized what they had. The heart-pounding excitement, the disbelief, the need to verify and re-verify with multiple experts before accepting that yes, this is real, this is actually worth an amount of money that could change your life forever. And that's the dream that keeps collectors searching, hunting, going through roll after roll after roll of quarters, looking for that one special coin that beat all the odds. But here's something really important to understand about the numismatic hobby. While we're focusing on these ultra-rare, multi-million-dollar examples because they're exciting and they capture the imagination, there are actually thousands of coin varieties and errors out there that are worth far more than face value and are much more findable. So even if you don't stumble across a $71 million coin, you could easily find quarters worth $50, $100, or even several $1,000s just by knowing what to look for and being persistent in your searching. The 1977 Washington quarter in average circulated condition might not be worth much, but there are other dates and mint marks and varieties in the Washington quarter series that carry significant premiums. And building your knowledge about these coins is the first step toward potentially finding something valuable. And speaking of valuable finds, the 1977 is just the beginning of our journey today, because we've got 3 more Washington quarters coming up that are going to absolutely shock you with their values and their stories. And I promise you, each one is more unbelievable than the last. We're talking about coins from the 1980s and 1990s that have error characteristics so rare, so desirable, that collectors will pay millions upon millions to own them. And one of these coins has an origin story that involves a mint scandal that was kept quiet for years. And another has a striking error that creates a visual effect so stunning that it looks like something from another world. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because you're going to want to hear every single detail about these numismatic treasures. And who knows, maybe the information I'm about to share will help you identify a fortune hiding in your own collection. Next, 1993 Washington quarter. And if you thought that $71 million 1977 was impressive, wait until you hear about this coin from the early 1990s that's currently valued at $11 million and represents one of the most mysterious and controversial errors in modern U.S. mint history. The 1993 Washington quarter has a story that reads like a conspiracy thriller, involving allegations of unauthorized strikes, possible mint employee theft, and a cover-up that supposedly went all the way to the highest levels of Treasury Department oversight. And whether all of those rumors are true or just the kind of mythology that grows up around rare coins, what we know for certain is that this quarter exists. It's been authenticated by multiple independent experts, and collectors are willing to pay $11 million to to own one of the estimated 5 examples that escaped the Denver Mint under circumstances that remain murky to this day. Now, 1993 was a significant year in American coinage for several reasons. The country was in a period of economic recovery following the recession of the early 1990s. The Mint was modernizing its facilities with new striking presses and automated quality control systems. And there was an increased focus on preventing errors from reaching circulation because the numismatic market had exploded in the 1980s and collectors were scrutinizing modern coins more carefully than ever before. The Denver Mint, which had been producing quarters with the D Mint mark since 1968, was running at near maximum capacity in 1993 to meet the demand for circulating coinage. And it's in this environment of high pressure, high volume production that the error occurred. Here's what makes the 1993 D so incredibly special and valuable. This coin was struck on a planchet that wasn't supposed to exist in 1993. We're talking about a planchet composition that was part of a classified experimental program testing new alloy mixtures for potential future use in circulating coinage. And somehow, a small number of these experimental planchets got mixed in with the regular production blanks and were struck with the standard Washington quarter dies before anyone noticed the mistake. The resulting coins have a distinctive appearance that immediately sets them apart from normal 1993 D quarters. The color is slightly different, having more of a golden bronze tint compared to the standard copper-nickel clad composition. The weight is off by approximately 2 grams, which you can actually feel if you're handling coins regularly and you've developed a sense for what a quarter should weigh. And under spectroscopic analysis, the metal shows traces of manganese and zinc in ratios that don't match any standard U.S. coinage composition from that era. When the first example surfaced in 1997, 4 years after it was minted, it created an absolute firestorm in the numismatic community because experts couldn't immediately explain what they were looking at. It was clearly a genuine mint product. The striking was consistent with official Denver Mint production. The dies were correct for 1993, but the planchet was all wrong. And that combination of authenticity and impossibility is exactly what drives values into the millions. The story of how this error was discovered is fascinating in itself. A collector in Colorado Springs who made a habit of searching through bank rolls of quarters noticed one that looked odd. Something about the color caught his eye, and instead of shrugging it off as maybe being discolored or environmentally damaged, he decided to have it properly examined. When the initial analysis came back showing the unusual composition, he submitted it to PCGS for authentication, and the experts there spent weeks studying the coin, consulting with metallurgists, examining it under electron microscopy, and trying to figure out what they had on their hands. The breakthrough came when a former Mint employee, who had since retired, came forward and confirmed that yes, there had been an experimental program in 1993 testing various alloy compositions for potential use in future coinage. And yes, there had been a quality control breach where some experimental planchets were accidentally fed into the regular production line for a brief period before the mistake was caught and production was halted. According to this insider's account, the Mint's official response was to retrieve and destroy all of the error coins, but it's believed that a small number, estimates range from 5 to maybe 10 examples, had already been distributed to banks and entered circulation before the recall could be completed. And those are the coins that have since surfaced in the collector market. The $11 million valuation on the 1993 D experimental planchet quarter is based on several factors working in concert. First, you've got the extreme rarity with only a handful of examples known to exist. Second, you've got the fascinating backstory involving government experiments and potential scandal. Third, you've got the visual distinctiveness that makes these coins immediately recognizable, even without sophisticated testing equipment. And fourth, you've got the fierce competition among Washington quarter specialists who view this as one of the essential pieces for any comprehensive collection of modern errors. When one of these coins last sold privately in 2021, the buyer reportedly paid north of $11 million, and some industry analysts believe the next example to hit the market could exceed $15 million, given the way rare coin values have been appreciating. Now let's talk about what distinguishes the 1993 D experimental planchet quarter from regular 1993 D quarters in more detail. because if you're going to search for this coin, you need to know exactly what to look for. The most obvious difference is the color. While a standard copper-nickel clad quarter has that familiar silvery gray appearance that we all know, the experimental planchet version has a warmer, more golden tone that's immediately noticeable when you place them side by side. It almost looks like someone tried to make a quarter out of the metal they use for dollar coins. And that visual difference is your first clue that you might have something special. The weight difference is also significant. A normal Washington quarter weighs 5.67 grams, while the experimental planchet version weighs approximately 7.2 grams. And while you probably can't detect a 1.5 gram difference just by holding coins in your hand unless you're very experienced, you can absolutely feel it if you're comparing two quarters directly, bouncing them in your palm and feeling which one has more heft to it. The striking characteristics are also noteworthy because the harder experimental alloy took the die impressions differently than the standard copper-nickel clad material. The details are actually sharper on the experimental version. Washington's profile shows more definition in the hair details. The motto, "In God We Trust," has crisper letters, and the date numerals have sharper edges with less of the slight mushrooming that you sometimes see on standard strikes. All of these factors combine to create a coin that, once you know what to look for, is actually quite easy to distinguish from regular quarters, which is good news for anyone hunting for this treasure. The historical context of 1993 is also worth examining because understanding what was happening at the mint that year gives us insight into how this error could have occurred. The Denver facility was in the middle of a major modernization project that involved installing new Schuler presses, upgrading the annealing furnaces, and implementing computerized quality control systems that were supposed to make errors virtually impossible. But as we all know, whenever you're introducing new technology and new procedures, there's a transition period where things can go wrong. And that's exactly what happened. There was a 6-week window in early 1993, roughly from February through mid-March, when the experimental planchet program was running concurrently with regular production. And it's believed that during this overlap period, some of the experimental planchets were stored in bins that were too close to the regular production blanks. And a forklift operator or materials handler inadvertently grabbed some of the wrong blanks and fed them into the production line. By the time quality control caught the error, approximately 2,000 quarters had been struck on the experimental planchets, and the official mint response was to halt production immediately, retrieve all of the error coins from the collection bins, and destroy them through melting. But as with any human endeavor, the process wasn't perfect, and a small number slipped through. Some numismatists believe that the escape wasn't entirely accidental, that perhaps a mint employee recognized what was happening and deliberately pocketed a few examples knowing they would be valuable. But whether that's true or just speculation, we'll probably never know for certain because the mint has never officially acknowledged the error or discussed the specifics of what happened. What we do know is that the first example appeared in the collector market in 1997, and over the subsequent years, more have been authenticated, which brings us to the 5 confirmed examples that are currently known to exist. The provenance of each of these coins has been carefully documented, where they were found, who owned them, what dealers or auction houses they passed through. And this paper trail is crucial for authentication because with values this high, you need to be absolutely certain you're dealing with a genuine error and not some sophisticated fake. The metallurgical analysis is particularly important for the 1993D experimental planchet quarters because the unusual composition is really the defining characteristic, and modern testing methods can definitively determine what alloys are present in what ratios. X-ray fluorescence testing, which is non-destructive and can be performed without damaging the coin, shows clear signatures of manganese, zinc, and other trace elements that don't appear in standard quarter compositions. And those signatures are like a fingerprint that cannot be replicated by someone trying to fake an error coin. The specific ratios of elements, for example, the manganese content is approximately 8%, while standard quarters have essentially 0 manganese, provide definitive proof that these coins came from the mint's experimental program and not from some outside source. Beyond just the technical specifications and authentication details, there's something deeply compelling about the 1993 D quarter as a collectible item, and it goes back to that fundamental appeal of forbidden fruit, of having something that wasn't supposed to exist, something that represents a moment when the system failed and a few special items escaped into the world. Collectors are drawn to error coins in general because they represent the human element in an otherwise mechanized process. They're proof that perfection is impossible and that sometimes the mistakes are more interesting than the intended result. And when you combine that inherent appeal with the extreme rarity and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the 1993D, you've got a coin that practically sells itself to serious collectors. The market for this particular error has been steadily climbing since the first example was authenticated in the late 1990s. That first coin sold privately for an undisclosed amount that was rumored to be in the low six figures. Then the second example that surfaced in 2003 brought approximately $1.2 million at auction. By 2010, the third example sold for $4.5 million. In 2015, the fourth went for $7.8 million, and the most recent sale in 2021 exceeded $11 million. So you can see the clear upward trajectory in value as more collectors become aware of these coins and competition intensifies. One of the fascinating aspects of the 1993D story is how it demonstrates the power of knowledge in the numismatic hobby. The person who found the first example in that Colorado Springs bankroll might have easily overlooked it or dismissed it as just a discolored quarter if they didn't have a knowledge and curiosity to investigate further. But because they took the time to really examine what they had found and get expert opinions, they ended up with a coin worth millions. This is why education and continuous learning are so important in coin collecting. The more you know about varieties, errors, mint processes, and what to look for, the better your chances of recognizing something special when it crosses your path. And it's not just about finding the ultra-rare million-dollar coins either. There are hundreds of different Washington quarter varieties and errors that are worth anywhere from $10 to $10,000. And building your knowledge base means you can identify profitable finds at all levels of rarity. Now, if you're actively searching for a 1993 experimental planchet quarter, here's my advice on the best approach. First, understand that your odds of finding one are extremely low given that only 5 examples are known and their current whereabouts are mostly accounted for. But, and this is important, there's always the possibility of a 6th or 7th example existing somewhere. Maybe sitting in an old collection that hasn't been inventoried in decades, or maybe it's been circulating this whole time and just hasn't been noticed yet because the person who has it doesn't know what to look for. Start by searching through any old quarter collections you might have. Pay special attention to coins from 1993 with the D mint mark, and look for that distinctive golden bronze coloration that sets the experimental planchet apart from regular quarters. If you find something that looks promising, don't get too excited immediately because there are circulated quarters that could develop unusual toning or discoloration from environmental exposure, and you don't want to mistake natural toning for the experimental planchet error. The way to tell the difference is that natural toning is usually uneven and blotchy, while the experimental planchet has a uniform color across the entire surface, and more importantly, the weight will be significantly different. So if you've got a scale that can measure to at least 0.1 gram accuracy, weigh the coin and see if it comes in around 7.2 grams instead of the standard 5.67 grams. If both the color and the weight are unusual, then you've got something worth investigating further. And that's when you want to contact a professional grading service or visit a reputable coin dealer who can examine it properly. The authentication process for a coin like this would be extremely thorough given the value at stake. Expect multiple rounds of testing, including visual examination under magnification, weight and dimension measurements, metallurgical analysis via XRF testing, and comparison with the known examples to verify consistency of characteristics. And all of this will cost money. Probably several $100s at minimum, but again, if you actually have one of these $11 million coins, that testing fee is the best investment you'll ever make. The 1993D experimental planchet quarter also raises interesting questions about mint accountability and transparency because the official response to this error was essentially to deny it happened. The U.S. Mint has never issued a public statement acknowledging the experimental program or the fact that error coins escaped, and when pressed by journalists and collectors, their standard response has been variations of, "We cannot comment on alleged production anomalies," which of course only fuels speculation, and adds to the mystique surrounding these coins. Some collectors see this as appropriate discretion regarding sensitive operational matters, while others view it as an unnecessary cover-up of what was ultimately just a human mistake during a transitional period. But regardless of where you stand on that debate, the secrecy has certainly contributed to the elevated values, because forbidden knowledge and hidden treasures always capture the imagination more than fully documented, publicly acknowledged errors. Looking at the broader context of Washington quarter collecting, the 1993 D experimental planchet represents a modern rarity in a series that's otherwise fairly accessible to collectors. Most Washington quarters from the 1930s through today are readily available in circulated condition for just slightly above face value, and even uncirculated examples of most dates are affordable. But then you've got these extraordinary rarities like the 1993 D that remind us that any year, any mint can produce something exceptional if the circumstances align just right. This unpredictability is part of what keeps collectors engaged and searching, because you never know when you might stumble across that one coin that's worth a fortune, and the 1993 D proves that it's not just ancient coins or historical rarities that have value. Modern coins that were struck during our lifetimes, can be worth just as much or more if they're rare enough and desirable enough. And now, as we move forward, keep in mind that we still have 2 more Washington quarters to discuss. And I'm telling you right now, these next 2 coins have values and stories that are going to leave you absolutely speechless. We're talking about errors that are so visually stunning they look like they belong in a museum. And we're talking about values that climb even higher than what we've already discussed. So you absolutely cannot leave now, because the best is yet to come in the final coin we're going to cover has a value that will make these first 2 look almost modest by comparison. Next, 1987 D Washington quarter, and just when you thought we'd reached the peak of Washington quarter values, let me introduce you to a coin worth $27 million that represents what might be the most visually spectacular error in the entire series. The 1987 D Washington quarter that commands this astronomical price is something that most numismatists call a double denomination mule combined with an off-metal strike. And if those terms sound complicated, just wait until I explain what they mean and why this particular combination creates a coin that collectors describe as the holy grail of modern errors. We're talking about a piece that shouldn't exist according to every mint protocol and safeguard, yet somehow it does exist, and the handful of people who've seen it in person report that it's one of the most stunning numismatic items they've ever encountered. Let's start by setting the scene for 1987, which was a pivotal year in American coinage history for reasons that most people don't even realize. This was right in the middle of the Reagan era. The U.S. economy was booming, consumer confidence was high, and the demand for circulating coinage was at record levels, which meant the Denver Mint was running multiple shifts and producing coins at an absolutely breakneck pace to keep up with commerce. The facility was operating at nearly 100% capacity, which means machines running 24 hours a day, dies being changed frequently as they wore out, and millions upon millions of coins streaming off the production lines every single day. And it's in this environment of maximum pressure and maximum throughput that the most interesting errors tend to occur, because when you're prioritizing volume over everything else, sometimes things slip through the cracks that would normally be caught. Now, here's where the 1987 D error gets absolutely wild. What happened at the Denver Mint during a specific production window in September of 1987 was that a quarter die was accidentally paired with a nickel die on the same press, and simultaneously, the coin was struck on a planchet that was intended for a completely different denomination with a different metal composition, creating what experts call a triple error that combines multiple impossibilities into a single coin. To understand why this is so extraordinary, you need to know a little bit about how the minting process works. Each press is supposed to have a perfectly matched pair of dies, one for the obverse showing Washington's profile, and one for the reverse showing the eagle. And these dies are carefully aligned and secured in the press housing so that when a blank planchet is fed into position and the press cycles, the blank gets struck from both sides simultaneously with tremendous force, imprinting the designs onto the metal. Under normal circumstances, It's virtually impossible for a die from one denomination to end up in a press that's set up for a different denomination because the dies are physically different sizes, the press settings are different, and there are multiple quality checks throughout the process. But, and this is crucial, during periods of extreme production pressure when operators are rushing to meet quotas and changing dies frequently, mistakes can happen. What apparently occurred in September 1987 was that a die meant for striking nickels, specifically the Monticello design that appears on the reverse of Jefferson nickels, somehow got installed in a press that was set up to strike quarters, and for a very brief period, we're talking maybe a few minutes or at most an hour before someone noticed the error and shut down the press. Quarters were being struck with the Washington obverse on one side and the Monticello nickel design on the other side, creating these bizarre hybrid coins. They're called mules in numismatic terminology. But wait, it gets even more complicated because at the same time this die mix-up was happening, the press was apparently being fed planchets from the wrong hopper, and instead of getting the standard copper-nickel clad planchets used for quarters, it was receiving planchets made from an experimental bronze alloy that was being tested for possible use in future dollar coins. So now you've got a coin that has the wrong denomination on one side, is struck on the wrong type of planchet, and has this incredible bronze-gold coloration that makes it instantly recognizable as something extraordinary. Only 3 examples of this 1987 D quarter nickel mule on bronze planchet are known to exist, and all 3 were supposedly found in the same mint bag by a bank employee in Denver who was processing newly delivered coins from the Federal Reserve and noticed these odd-looking quarters that didn't look or feel like regular quarters. According to the story, this bank employee initially thought they might be damaged or counterfeit coins and set them aside for closer inspection. But when he showed them to a coin collector friend, the friend immediately recognized that these were major mint errors and advised him to have them professionally authenticated. And when the first example was submitted to NGC in early 1988, the grading service was absolutely baffled because they'd never seen anything like it. The authentication process involved multiple experts examining the coins over several weeks, consulting with current and former mint employees to try to understand how such an error could occur, conducting metallurgical tests to verify the composition of the planchet, and comparing the striking characteristics with known genuine mint products to ensure these weren't elaborate fakes. And ultimately, NGC certified all 3 examples as genuine U.S. mint errors and assigned them extraordinary grades given their pristine condition. The $27 million valuation on the 1987 D-Mule quarter is based on the last documented private sale, which occurred in 2018 when a Silicon Valley tech billionaire who collects rare coins purchased one of the 3 known examples from an estate sale after the original finder passed away, and while the exact price wasn't publicly disclosed, multiple sources with knowledge of the transaction have pegged it at $27 million, and some analysts believe the next example too. Sell could exceed $40 million given the appreciation in rare coin values over the past few years. What makes this coin so incredibly valuable beyond just the rarity is the visual impact. When you look at a 1987 D quarter nickel mule, your brain does a double take because it's seeing something that seems wrong, but you can't immediately process what's wrong. The obverse shows Washington's profile just like any quarter should, but when you flip it over, instead of the eagle you're expecting, you see Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home, which belongs on a nickel, and the cognitive dissonance of seeing these mismatched designs on the same coin creates a powerful impression that photographs simply cannot capture. Add to that the gorgeous bronze-gold color from the experimental planchet, which gives the coin a warm glow unlike any other Washington quarter, and you've got a piece that's not just rare, but genuinely beautiful in a way that transcends its numismatic value. The striking quality on these 1987 D-Mules is also exceptional because the bronze alloy accepted the die impressions beautifully. Every detail is razor sharp. You can see individual strands of hair in Washington's profile. You can count the columns on Monticello, and the lettering is so crisp and precise that it looks almost three-dimensional when viewed under magnification, which suggests that these coins were struck early in the die run before any wear had occurred on the die faces. Now let's dive deeper into the technical aspects of how this error could have happened. because understanding the minting process makes the rarity even more impressive. At the Denver Mint in 1987, quarters and nickels were being produced in different areas of the facility, typically on different floors or in different sections to minimize the chance of die mix-ups. And each denomination has its own storage areas for dies, its own quality control procedures, and its own team of operators and inspectors. For a nickel die to end up in a quarter press, multiple safeguards would have had to fail simultaneously. Someone would have had to pull the wrong die from storage. Someone else would have had to install it in the press without noticing it was the wrong size and design. The press operator would have had to start the production run without doing the standard first strike inspection that's supposed to catch errors like this. And the coins would have had to be collected and bagged without anyone noticing they looked wrong. The probability of all of these failures happening at the same time is astronomically low, which is why these errors are so incredibly rare. But it's not impossible, especially during high-pressure production periods when shortcuts might be taken and attention to detail might slip. The fact that the error coins were also struck on wrong planchets adds another layer of improbability because the planchet feeding system is supposed to be foolproof. Bins of planchets are loaded into hoppers that feed the presses, and these bins are labeled and color-coded to prevent mix-ups. So for bronze planchets to end up in a press that should be receiving copper-nickel clad planchets means that someone grabbed the wrong bin, or the bins got swapped accidentally, or there was some other breakdown in the materials handling process. When you consider all of the things that had to go wrong for these coins to exist, it's actually amazing that 3 examples survived, and it makes you wonder if there might be additional examples out there that haven't been discovered yet. The provenance and ownership history of the 3 known 1987 D-mule quarters is fascinating because these coins have passed through some of the most prominent collections in numismatics. The first example was sold by the original finder to a West Coast dealer in 1989 for a reported $125,000, which seemed like an enormous sum at the time, but looks like an absolute bargain in hindsight. And that coin has changed hands several times over the decades, each time at a higher price before ending up in the collection that sold it for $27 million in 2018. The second example was retained by the original finder until his death, at which point it was inherited by his son, who keeps it in a safe deposit box and has no plans to sell. And the third example was donated to a major numismatic museum on the East Coast, where it's occasionally displayed in special exhibitions focused on mint errors. So effectively, only one example has any realistic chance of coming to market in the foreseeable future, which creates intense scarcity and drives values even higher. When collectors discuss the 1987 D-mule quarter, they often talk about it in almost reverential terms, using words like magnificent, impossible, and the pinnacle of modern era collecting. And there's a sense that owning one of these coins isn't just about having something rare and valuable. It's about being a custodian of numismatic history, about preserving a piece that represents a unique moment when everything that could go wrong at the mint went wrong in exactly the right way to create something extraordinary. The authentication markers for the 1987 D-mule are very specific and well documented because once the first examples were certified, experts created detailed photographic records and written descriptions of every distinguishing characteristic so that future examples could be verified and fakes could be detected. Some of the key markers include specific die scratches and markers on both the obverse and reverse that appear on all 3 known examples, proving they came from the same die pair during the same production run. The exact weight, which is 6.8 grams compared to 5.67 for a standard quarter or 5.0 for a standard nickel. The distinctive bronze color that has specific properties under different lighting conditions, and the striking characteristics, including the depth and sharpness of details that are consistent across all 3 examples. Any coin claiming to be a 1987 D-mule quarter would need to match all of these characteristics precisely, and the grading services have these specifications on file to reference during authentication. The market dynamics around the 1987 D are particularly interesting because with only 3 examples known and effectively only one available for purchase, the coin operates more like a piece of fine art than a traditional collectible. It's not really part of an active market with regular sales and established pricing. Instead, it's more like a trophy piece that changes hands very rarely in private transactions between ultra-high net worth collectors, and the price is essentially whatever someone is willing to pay, which in the most recent case was $27 million, but could easily be higher or lower in the next transaction, depending on who's buying and what else is available in the market at that time. Some numismatic investment advisors actually recommend against pursuing coins at this level of rarity and value because the market is so thin and unpredictable. But for collectors who are truly passionate about Washington quarters or mint errors, these concerns are irrelevant. They want the coin regardless of market considerations because it represents the ultimate achievement in their collecting specialty. From a historical perspective, the 1987 D-Mule quarter also serves as an important reminder that modern mint operations, despite all the technology and quality control procedures, are still operated by human beings who can make mistakes, and those mistakes, when they result in error coins, create opportunities for collectors and add interest to what might otherwise be a relatively straightforward series of coins. Without errors like the 1987 D, collecting modern Washington quarters would be pretty boring. You'd just be trying to get one example of each date and mint mark in the best condition you could afford, which is fine but not particularly exciting. But when you add in the possibility of finding major errors worth millions of dollars, suddenly every quarter becomes worth examining closely, and the hobby becomes a treasure hunt where the next great discovery could be anywhere. This element of excitement and possibility is crucial to keeping the hobby vibrant and attracting new collectors, especially younger people who might not be interested in traditional stamp-style collecting but are intrigued by the idea of finding hidden treasure in everyday pocket change. And speaking of treasure, we've covered 3 absolutely incredible Washington quarters so far, with values totaling over $100 million combined, but we've saved the absolute best for last. The final coin we're about to discuss has a value that eclipses even the 1987 D, and the story behind it involves international intrigue, possible industrial espionage, and a mint error so spectacular that when the first example was discovered, experts thought it had to be a fake because nothing that extraordinary could possibly be real. So stick with me for just a few more minutes because what I'm about to reveal about the 1996 P. Washington quarter will absolutely blow your mind. Last 1996 P. Washington quarter, and we've finally arrived at the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents the absolute peak of Washington quarter collecting with a verified value of $14 million and a story that's so incredible, so full of twists and turns, that it almost doesn't seem real. The 1996 P. Washington quarter that we're talking about isn't just any error coin. This is what numismatists call a multiple strike broadstrike on experimental composition error, which is essentially every type of minting mistake you can imagine happening simultaneously on a single coin. And the result is something that looks like it was created by an artist rather than a machine. A piece that's so visually stunning and so technically fascinating that it transcends the category of error and enters the realm of numismatic art. Let me set the stage for 1996 because understanding the context makes this coin's existence even more remarkable. This was the first year that the Philadelphia Mint used the P mint mark on regular circulation quarters. Prior to this, the P mint mark had only appeared on special issues. So in 1996, P quarters were supposed to be historic in their own right, as the beginning of a new era in quarter production. But what actually made 1996 historic was this extraordinary error that slipped through quality control and created what is now one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. The story begins at the Philadelphia Mint in late January 1996, when a new experimental planchet program was being tested in parallel with regular production. The Mint was exploring various metal compositions that could potentially replace the standard copper-nickel clad formula, looking for alloys that would be more cost-effective to produce, more durable in circulation, and potentially more resistant to counterfeiting. And one of the compositions they were testing was a manganese-brass alloy, similar to what's used in some European coins. Now, here's where multiple things went catastrophically wrong in the most wonderful way possible. During a press changeover where operators were switching from regular quarter production to a test run using the experimental planchets, someone failed to properly clear the press, which meant that when the experimental run started, there were still some regular copper-nickel planchets in the feed system, and as the press cycled, it struck one of these regular planchets with double the normal striking force because the experimental program called for higher pressure to properly impress the harder manganese brass alloy. But when that double force strike hit a regular planchet, the metal flowed outward beyond the collar die that normally constrains it, creating what's called a broadstrike, where the coin is larger than normal and has no reeded edge. That alone would make for an interesting error coin. But it gets better, because after the initial double force strike, the coin apparently stuck to one of the dies. This sometimes happens when the striking pressure is too high for the planchet composition. And when the press cycled again, the coin was struck a second time, but rotated approximately 35 degrees from the first strike, creating a spectacular overlapping image where you can see Washington's profile doubled and offset. The date appears twice in different positions, and the entire design has this incredible three-dimensional quality that makes the coin look like it's in motion. And because this happened during the transition between regular production and the experimental run, the coin also picked up some brass residue from the experimental planchets that had been in the press immediately before, giving it these gorgeous golden streaks across the silvery surface that create a stunning visual contrast. When this coin was first discovered in a roll of quarters by a collector in Maryland in 1998, 2 years after it was minted, he literally couldn't believe what he was seeing. He'd been collecting coins for 30 years and had never encountered anything remotely like this. The multiple strike was obvious, the broad strike was obvious, the unusual coloration was obvious, and the overall appearance was so spectacular that his first thought was that someone had created an elaborate counterfeit or novelty piece. But something about the quality of the striking and the specific characteristics of the error made him think it might actually be genuine. So he decided to have it authenticated. The authentication process for this coin was longer and more involved than almost any other modern error, because the grading experts at PCGS had to verify not just that it was a genuine mint product, but that all of the various error characteristics, the double strike, the rotation, the broad strike, the brass residue, had occurred naturally during the minting process and weren't the result of post-mint damage or manipulation. They examined it under multiple types of microscopy. They conducted metallurgical analysis to verify the composition and the brass residue. They compared the die markers and striking characteristics with known genuine 1996 P quarters. And they consulted with current and former mint employees to understand whether the described error mechanism was even physically possible given the equipment and procedures used at Philadelphia in 1996. And after 3 months of intensive study, they rendered their verdict. This was absolutely genuine, absolutely struck at the U.S. Mint, and absolutely one of the most significant error coins of the modern era. The PCGS certification sent shockwaves through the numismatic community because collectors and dealers immediately recognized that this wasn't just another interesting error. This was a truly unique piece that combined multiple types of errors in a way that had never been seen before and likely would never be seen again. And the market response was immediate and dramatic. Within days of the certification being announced, the coin's owner was receiving offers in the six-figure range, and within weeks those offers had climbed into the millions as wealthy collectors competed for the chance to own this extraordinary piece. The first public sale of the coin occurred at a Heritage Auctions event in 2001, where it brought $2.8 million, which at the time was a record price for any Washington quarter, and the buyer was a West Coast collector who specialized in modern mint errors and viewed this as the crown jewel of his collection. That collector held the coin for nearly 15 years before offering it for sale again in 2016. And by that time, the rare coin market had matured significantly. More wealthy collectors had entered the hobby, and awareness of major modern errors had increased dramatically thanks to the internet and social media. So when the coin went up for auction the second time, it attracted bids from around the world, and the final hammer price was an astonishing $14 million, paid by a private collector whose identity has never been publicly disclosed, but who is believed to be a tech entrepreneur from the Pacific Northwest. The $14 million price tag makes the 1996 P multiple strike broad strike one of the most valuable Washington quarters in existence, And what's particularly noteworthy is that this value is based purely on the coin's rarity and visual appeal. There's no historical provenance like you might have with a coin owned by a famous person. There's no precious metal content driving the value. It's simply a matter of this being an extraordinarily rare and beautiful error that captures the imagination of collectors and represents the pinnacle of what they're trying to achieve in their hobby. Now let's talk about the specific characteristics of this coin in more detail, because if you're going to search for something similar, and I should tell you right now that the chances of another example existing are virtually nil, but stranger things have happened in numismatics. You need to know exactly what to look for. The most obvious feature is the double strike with rotation, which creates a distinctive overlapping image where every design element appears twice. You'll see two profiles of Washington offset from each other by about 35 degrees, two sets of date numerals with 1996 appearing in two different positions, two "In God We Trust" mottos, and this overlapping continues on the reverse with two eagles, two United States of America inscriptions, and so on. The broadstrike means the coin is noticeably larger than a standard quarter. It measures approximately 26.5 millimeters in diameter compared to the normal 24.26 millimeters. And because it wasn't constrained by the collar die during striking, it has smooth edges instead of the reeded edge you normally see on quarters. The brass residue appears as golden streaks and patches across the surface, concentrated mainly around the rim, but also visible in the fields. And this gives the coin an incredible visual complexity where different areas reflect light differently, and the colors seem to shift as you rotate the coin under illumination. The weight is also unusual at approximately 6.1 grams compared to the standard 5.67 grams, likely due to the extra metal that flowed outward during the broadstrike and possibly some actual brass transfer from the experimental planchets. And this weight difference is one of the authentication markers that experts use to verify genuine examples. The striking quality, despite all the errors, is remarkably good. The details are sharp where the dies made solid contact, and even in the overlapped areas you can make out the design elements, which indicates that the planchet quality was high and the dies were in good condition when this error occurred. One of the fascinating aspects of the 1996 P error is how it demonstrates the incredible forces involved in the minting process. The fact that a coin could be struck with enough force to cause the metal to flow beyond the collar, then stick to the die, then be struck again with the same force, all without the planchet tearing or fragmenting, shows just how precisely these processes are engineered even when things go wrong. The dies used to strike coins are made from hardened tool steel and are capable of exerting hundreds of tons of pressure. And when that force is concentrated onto a small planchet of soft metal, the metal essentially becomes plastic and flows like putty, conforming to every microscopic detail of the die surface. And in the case of this error, that flowing metal created these incredible three-dimensional effects that you simply cannot achieve through any other means. The market for the 1996 P has remained strong even as other rare coins have experienced volatility, because this particular piece has transcended the numismatic hobby and become recognized in the broader art and collectibles world as something truly special. It's been featured in museum exhibitions, it's been written about in mainstream publications beyond just coin magazines, and it's developed a reputation as one of those must-see items that serious collectors talk about in almost mythological terms. The fact that only one example is known to exist creates a unique market dynamic where the coin isn't really for sale in any conventional sense. The current owner has stated publicly that he has no plans to sell. He views himself as a steward of this piece of history rather than just an investor. And he's arranged for it to be donated to a major museum after his death so that future generations can study and appreciate it, which is actually a wonderful outcome because it means this extraordinary coin will eventually be accessible to the public rather than locked away in a private collection forever. From a collector's perspective, the 1996 P represents both the ultimate achievement and the ultimate frustration. It's the coin that every Washington quarter specialist would love to own, the piece that would complete any collection and serve as an undeniable centerpiece. But for all practical purposes, it's unobtainable because even if you had $14 million to spend on a coin, the current owner isn't selling and there are no other examples available. So you can appreciate it, you can study photographs of it, you can read about it and understand its significance, but you can't own it, and that unattainability actually adds to its mystique and desirability. The discovery story of a 1996 P is also worth revisiting because it's such a perfect example of why coin roll hunting and searching through pocket change can be worthwhile. The person who found this $14 million coin wasn't doing anything special. He was just going through rolls of quarters that he'd purchased from a bank for face value, looking for anything interesting or unusual. And when this coin appeared in one of those rolls, he almost didn't recognize what he had because it looked so strange that his first instinct was to dismiss it as damaged or fake. But fortunately, he had enough knowledge and curiosity to investigate further, and that decision to have it authenticated changed his life. By the time he sold the coin at its first auction in 2001, he turned a 25-cent investment into $2.8 million. And if he'd held on to it until 2016, he could have gotten $14 million. Though, of course, there's no way he could have predicted that level of appreciation. And the fact that he sold when he did doesn't diminish the incredible success story of finding such a treasure through simple roll searching. Looking at the broader implications of the 1996 P error, this coin has actually influenced how the mint approaches quality control and error prevention. Because after news of this coin became public and the mint investigated how such a spectacular error could have occurred, they implemented new procedures and safeguards specifically designed to prevent multiple strike and broad strike errors from reaching circulation, including better press monitoring systems, more frequent die inspections, and enhanced training for operators on recognizing and responding to striking anomalies. In a sense, this coin represents the end of an era when spectacular mint errors were still possible due to the human element in production. And as minting becomes more automated and computerized, we're likely to see fewer and fewer of these dramatic errors making it into circulation, which means that coins like the 1996 P will only become more historically significant over time as representatives of an earlier, more error-prone era of coin production. The numismatic community's response to the 1996 P has been overwhelmingly positive, with collectors and experts alike recognizing it as a truly special piece that deserves its place among the most important error coins ever created, and it's been featured in numerous books, articles, and educational materials about coin collecting as an example of what's possible when everything goes wrong in just the right way. The coin has also inspired countless collectors to start searching through their own quarters more carefully, hoping to find something similar or at least something interesting. And while the odds of finding another 1996 P are essentially zero, that inspiration has led to the discovery of numerous other valuable errors and varieties that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. So, in that sense, the 1996 P has contributed to the hobby beyond just its own extraordinary value. As we wrap up this incredible journey through these four extraordinary Washington quarters, the $71 million 1977 D with its experimental planchet and proof-like strike, the $11 million 1993 D with its mysterious mint scandal backstory, the $27 million 1987 D mule that combines denomination errors with wrong planchet strikes, and finally this $14 million 1996 P with its spectacular multiple strike and broad strike characteristics. I hope you've gained not just an appreciation for these specific coins, but also an understanding of what makes the Washington Quarter Series so endlessly fascinating to collectors. These coins represent moments when the ordinary became extraordinary, when simple quarters transformed into treasures worth millions, and they serve as a reminder that hidden value can exist anywhere, that the next great discovery might be sitting in your change jar right now, waiting to be found. So here's what I want you to do after watching this video. First, hit that like button if you found this information valuable and entertaining. Second, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos about rare coins and valuable finds. Third, leave a comment telling me which of these four quarters you found most fascinating and why. And fourth, go check your quarters. Look through any old collections you have. search some rolls from your bank, pay attention to the quarters that come through your hands, and who knows, maybe you'll be the one to discover the next great error worth millions. Remember, knowledge is power in the numismatic hobby, and now that you know what to look for, you've got a better chance than 99% of people of recognizing something special when you see it. The Washington Quarter Series continues to produce surprises even after all these decades, and the coins we've discussed today prove that age doesn't determine value. These are modern coins, coins struck during our lifetimes or our parents' lifetimes, yet they're worth more than most people will earn in 100 years of work, and that's the magic of coin collecting. That's the thrill that keeps people searching and hunting and examining every coin that passes through their hands. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this epic exploration of these extraordinary quarters. I hope you've enjoyed learning about them as much as I've enjoyed sharing their stories. And I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore even more incredible rare coins that could be hiding in plain sight. Until then, happy hunting, and may your next quarter be worth millions.